Hi there, and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Here's what we're looking at.
I can assure you that what you will observe is a vast wasteland.
Best known for describing TV as a vast wasteland, Newt Minow had a passion for public service and public television. We remember the 97-year-old Chicago attorney who died on Saturday.
Plus, a look back on his legacy with some Chicagoans who knew him well.
And Asian American Action Day is tomorrow. Local organizations head to the Capitol to advocate for legislation.
And now to some of today's top stories. Mayor Lori Lightfoot gave a farewell address today. The event took place at the West Side headquarters of BUILD, a gang intervention, violence prevention, and youth development organization. Lightfoot spent time touting her accomplishments and got emotional when talking about the four-letter word she says kept her going.
And let me tell you, my friends, the four-letter word that propelled me forward every single day of this incredible journey, one that I intoned every time that I needed to rise above the noise and the despair. That four-letter word was spelled H-O-P-E.
And Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson will be inaugurated 1 week from today.
U.S. Senator Dick Durbin, Congressman Danny Davis, and others are touting new federal legislation designed to expand support for children who have experienced trauma. They visited Bright Star Church on the South Side to make the announcement.
What we're talking about is not only to establish a network of providers, but to make sure that the outreach is met with professionals who know what to do, know how to sit down and counsel young people and adults as well who have gone through the trauma of violence in their lives.
The bill means the creation of a $600 million grant program to fund community-based coalitions to coordinate services to address trauma. Another grant program is there to support hospital-based trauma interventions and funding to help recruit more mental health clinicians.
The Chicago Police Department today released a brief statement on the off-duty police officer who was killed over the weekend. 24-year-old Ariana Preston had just finished her shift and was heading home at 1:40 a.m. Saturday when she was shot and killed in the Avalon Park neighborhood. In a release, CPD said, quote, "We join Officer Preston's family and loved ones in mourning the loss of our fallen hero. Our hearts are heavy, but through our grief, we will carry on her legacy of service to Chicago and its people." Preston had been with the police department just 3 years. There are reports that 5 people had been arrested in connection with the shooting. No confirmation yet from CPD.
And coming up in the program, remembering Newt Minow.
We start with a look at his life and career. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Perhaps nobody did more to improve the quality of television in the United States than Newt Minow. He served as FCC chairman from 1961 to 1963 under President John F. Kennedy. He had a hand in the creation of WTTW, PBS, and in nearly every presidential debate since the famous Kennedy-Nixon debate of 1960. He was a Chicago civic titan who played a key role in the rise of Barack Obama and has been a guiding light for this program and this station for decades. Newt Minow died over the weekend at the age of 97. He'll be remembered for, among many other things, those famous words he uttered to television broadcasters back in 1961.
Keep your eyes glued to that set until the station signs off. I can assure you that what you will observe is a vast wasteland.
Newt Minow will be forever remembered for those words spoken to television executives in 1961 when he was chairman of the Federal Communications Commission. Minow wanted the industry to use precious public airwaves for good, not just for profit.
I saw that using this medium, certainly for entertainment, but also for education in a large sense, stimulation, I would hope inspiration.
His entire life's work was devoted to strengthening the institutions of American democracy. His life story, a quintessential American story. Born to Jewish immigrants in Milwaukee, serving in the Army and becoming the first in his family to graduate college, going on to get a law degree from Northwestern. That's where he met his future wife of 70-plus years, Josephine. Minow worked on the two presidential campaigns of Illinois Governor Adlai Stevenson before signing on to JFK's 1960 bid, later telling Phil Ponce that meeting Kennedy was like love at first sight.
He had a marvelous, quick sense of humor, great wit. He had, apart from charm, he had a first-class intellect.
Kennedy tapped Minow for the FCC, where Minow gave his famed speech that exhorted television executives to do better. It led to the passage of laws to expand all television sets to receive UHF signals, as well as to the launch of the first ever communications satellites.
And I said, Mr. President, communications satellites are more important than sending a man into space. And he said, why is that? I said, communication satellites will send ideas into space. Ideas last longer than people.
Under Minow's tenure, Congress appropriated funds for public television, and PBS was eventually born.
I welcome station WTTW to the air.
In 1967 in Chicago, a fledgling educational television station called on Minow, now in private law practice, to become chairman of its board of trustees. He and Josephine were active in supporting WTTW from its birth.
My wife was one of many who, door to door in the neighborhood, knocked on every door and asked for a $5 or $10 contribution, which went to WTTW to get us established and get us launched and able to broadcast.
Under Minow's guidance, WTTW became the most watched public TV station in the country and paved the way for programs like Chicago Tonight and The Week in Review. Minow remained a long-time station trustee. In private practice, Minow famously hired a young community organizer just out of law school named Barack Obama. Obama says he owes Minow a great debt, particularly because he helped introduce him to another young lawyer named Michelle Robinson, whom he, of course, married. Minow was an early supporter of Obama's presidential campaign.
He's got a combination of two things. He's got a first-class mind, and he's got a first-class temperament.
Minow was also a driving force in the creation of televised presidential debates. He's been involved in every one, starting with the infamous Kennedy-Nixon debate of 1960.
I trust the American people to evaluate that person and make a judgment whether they want to vote for him or not.
In 2016, President Obama awarded Minow the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He is survived by his three daughters, Nell, Martha, and Mary. Minow was 97 years old. And his former intern, former President Obama, reacted over the weekend saying, quote, Minow embodied the ideal of public service, helping launch satellites that made nationwide broadcasts possible, cementing presidential debates as a national institution, helping usher in public television, and reminding the media of its obligation to foster a well-informed citizenry, a message we take with us every single day. And joining us to talk about Newt Minow and his legacy are Carol Marine, former political editor at NBC5, and of course, former contributor to WTTW Chicago Tonight, now co-director of the DePaul Center for Journalism, Integrity, and Excellence. And also joining us is, you know this gentleman, former Chicago Tonight host Phil Ponce, and Chris Abenante, a partner at Sidley Austin, where Newt Minow worked for more than 50 years. Chris is also a member of WTTW's Board of Trustees. Thank you all for being with us tonight. Carol Marine, you mentioned in our online story that you saw Newt at a dinner party he hosted a week ago. How did he seem back then?
Fabulous. So we had honored Judy Woodruff at DePaul, and Newt said, well, you know, I think after the luncheon, I should host a dinner party for her. What do you think? Sure. At his home, there were 8 of us there. He was dressed to the nines, as he always was, perfect pocket square, sat us down at dinner and said, I'd like to discuss as a group one whole idea. And you go, Yes, sir. You know, he was in his glory. He looked marvelous. He was marvelous.
And Phil, even at 97, he was engaged, he was active, he was passionate about Chicago.
Paris, some people would think it's no tragedy when somebody who's 97 years old dies. But make no mistake about this. This was really a profound loss because, as you say, Newt was engaged. He was not only all there, but Newt was always a fountain of new ideas. And just as Carol said, he wanted our dinner party to have some substance. Newt was always generating new ideas. He believed that he had a fresher mind, I think, than anyone in that room. And that room includes the former dean of the Harvard Law School, his daughter, Martha Minow. So Carol is right. He was engaged, he was spot on, he was bright, he wanted to know what was going on in the world, and he was still of the world.
And I think we all experienced that. He would send us emails, he would talk to us in passing. Chris Abenante, he really relished, among other things, this role of being a mentor to so many people, including Barack Obama. Tell us how that relationship came to be.
The Barack relationship?
Yeah.
Well, Barack was coming to our firm. His daughter, Martha, was at the time at Harvard, and she phoned up someone at the firm, her dad, and said, you have someone remarkable coming to your firm this summer. Would you take him under your wing a little bit and show him the ropes? And so he did. There's a famous story about him going to the movies and seeing Barack and Michelle out at the movies together.
Michelle had already been working at Sidley.
Michelle was his advisor, his mentor at the time, but they knew each other, and rest is history.
So instrumental in that relationship. Carol, he also was a mentor to you. I mean, he was instrumental in you coming to Chicago tonight, was he not?
He was. It's the weird thing, though, and I said this when we gave Newt our Distinguished Mentor Award, the first ever at DePaul, and I said, I was at a dinner once, and I said, Newt Minow, he's my mentor. And some other voice goes, he's my mentor.
That's right.
And suddenly there's this competition because the truth is he was everybody's mentor. I mean, so many of us claim him. And
Yours too, Phil.
Listen, Carol's right. Today, Rich Samuels had a Facebook post. Rich Samuels, former colleague of mine, says, Newt Minow was my mentor. Carol, you're absolutely right. Newt mentored a lot of people. You yourself have received notes from Newt.
I remember I was doing a report, and I walked out of the studio, and in the hallway is Newt Minow, and I kind of froze, and he said, Paris, you're doing a fine job. And I said, well, Mr. Minow, thank you. I guess that made me feel legitimized that the former chairman of the FCC would say that. Chris, this speech, the vast wasteland speech, I know it's mentioned every time we seem to talk about Newt Minow, but what was the practical impact of that speech that he gave?
I think it just got people to realize the potential for TV. He loved television, and he just wanted people to realize it could be used in a lot of different ways and a lot of good. And so, Newt was a TV junkie, I think, to the last, and he just saw it as an opportunity to spread ideas, educate. He really took that post to task.
Paris, let me say that people forget. I was a kid, but you read accounts of that speech. It had an explosive impact. He was like Daniel in the lion's den. He went before a group of broadcasters, and he basically called them out. What you're putting on the air is trash. It was electrifying. He was voted one of the most influential people in the country. He was written up in Time, Newsweek, all the newspapers had articles about
editorial
it.
cartoons saying, who is this whippersnapper who is lecturing Bill Paley, the Murrow
But
years?
television got back at him. How?
The SS Minnow.
Oh, God.
Gilligan's
Island. So, yeah, it was a slap at Newt that he loved. They misspelled it, of course.
But they named the boat
the
that
SS
sank
Minnow.
the SS Minnow as a way of tweaking Newt's speech on the vast
Well, I think the other point made by his daughters was that to that point, the chairman of the FCC was kind of cozy with broadcasters. The FCC as a body was cozy with broadcasters. And here comes someone who actually wants to reform and have oversight over the industry. Carol Maureen, to viewers and supporters of WTTW and Chicago Tonight, what should they know about how Newt Minow impacted this station?
He inspired us. He inspired us in a really low-key kind of way. He's famous for taking people out for breakfast or lunch or, something. at many breakfasts with him, he'd have a little slip of paper with a few notes on it. He never wasted paper, so it's like the back of an envelope. And he said, I'd like to talk about the following things. On the show, the other night, when that interview was going on, what was the subtext of that? I mean, he saw TV, he saw through TV, but he loved it. He loved us. He loved what he created, and he didn't see himself as the creator, I have to say.
He loved this program, but he brought in Bill McCarter to run this station, which kind of changed the fortunes here.
Well, listen, I know we've been talking about public television, and his influence in that was profound, to put it mildly. He said he really wanted to be remembered more so for the efforts that he did in launching those communication satellites than he did Vast Wasteland. But listen, besides public television, the breadth of his experience in different areas, he was one of the city's grown-ups. This is a man who had perspective. He had seen it all. He was an advisor to presidents. He would tell stories about his time with, Chris was saying before we went on the air that Newt was one of the great storytellers. He tells a story of being in the White House residence with John Kennedy. John Kennedy got out of the shower. He's putting on his shirt and tie. John Kennedy is going to be talking to broadcasters, and Newt is briefing him on some of the issues, and he thinks the president is not paying attention. Kennedy goes out and gives a speech that was coherent, original, and based on what Newt had said. Newt said he was flabbergasted.
And he told you that he fell in love with Kennedy the first time he met him in 1960. And it wasn't just Kennedy. It seems like Newt Minow had a relationship with like nearly every Democratic president since then. What was his relationship with presidents?
Probably every president, actually. I think he had a relationship with about 7 presidents. And
we're not sure about Trump, but I think even
else,
Trump.
yeah.
But can I just throw? He was in love with somebody else. He was in love with Joe Minow. Right. And before we close this interview, there wasn't a speech that Newt ever gave that he didn't bring up Joe, because she was with him. She was part of him. They raised those 3 unbelievable daughters. And so, and I choke up when I say it, but she was his abiding, guiding light. And she could say to him, you know, Newt, that vast you know what. She had a sense of humor.
She had a sense of humor, and he would always jokingly refer to her as my current wife, Joe. They were married for more than 70 years. You know, Chris,
can I just piggyback on what Carol just said? I believe in my heart Newt had 2 loves. Number 1, Joe and his family. Number 2, democracy and the institutions that support democracy,
Absolutely.
Including Congress, including the presidency, and including the Supreme Court, and all the institutions like the airwaves, like freedom of speech, that support a strong democracy.
I think that drove a lot of what he did. Chris, what about his private life in law? I mean, he was known as a proponent of civil rights. He was a proponent of equity, diversity. Talk about that side of him.
And a business leader as well. I mean, our law firm is a $3 billion organization in large part because of what he did along the way. I mean, he really was a Renaissance man. And lawyers these days practice in one area or the other. Newt did a little bit of everything, whether it was litigation, whether it was whether it was on boardrooms, whether it was regulatory work. He sat on public company boards. He really had a profound effect on the city's business and civic community.
A life of enormous consequence and a profound effect on all of us here at WTTW.
So we loved him.
We certainly did. Carol
him.
Marine, Phil Ponce, Chris Abenante, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll have more on Newt Minow throughout the whole week. And one of the ways Newt Minow has supported us at WTTW News is with the Minow Fellowship. That's a year-long program that gives aspiring young journalists hands-on experience in our newsroom. And so it's fitting that up next, we have a story produced by our current Minow Fellow, Eunice Alpasan. We'll have details about Asian American Action Day up next, so please stick around.
A coalition of Asian Americans are descending on Springfield tomorrow, advocating for legislation to meet the community's needs. It's for Asian American Action Day, led by the Pan-Asian Voter Empowerment Coalition. It's also happening during Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Joining us now with more are Grace Pai, Executive Director of Asian Americans Advancing Justice Chicago, and Van Nguyen, Executive Director of the Vietnamese Association of Illinois. Thanks to you both for joining us. Grace, welcome in. We've talked a lot over the last couple of years. First, tell us, what is this day in Springfield all about?
So every May during Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, the Pan-Asian Voter Empowerment Coalition brings advocates to Springfield, hundreds of community members, to advocate on issues that impact the Asian American community. You know, we really want to uplift things like language access, affordable housing, healthcare, to really prioritize and to show legislators that the Asian American community is vocal, is active, and cares about a lot of important issues.
Vaughn, you've got more than 300 people expected to head to Springfield tomorrow advocating for the community. Who's part of this coalition?
Yeah, it's a very diverse group of, East Asian Americans, Southeast Asian Americans, Muslim folks, different sort of ethnicity and also languages that are being represented in this moment. And we're just very excited. The platform that's coming out of this is also created by this coalition, a very diverse group of people coming together to say, like, these are the issues that are important to us.
How are folks feeling ahead of the trip? What is it they really want to gain when they're down there?
Yeah, folks are really excited. I know working with the Vietnamese American community, this is the first year since the pandemic that we're coming back in person. And so folks are really excited to be able to talk to legislators, to really advocate for the issues. We've done a lot of prep work leading up to this to educate our community members about what are the issues, about the different bills that are on the table for them to really engage in a meaningful way with legislators. Not only is it a sort of a tour of the Capitol, it's a lot of folks' first time being in Springfield, but to be able to get information and to engage in language so that they could really understand what's happening when they're there.
Well, and to that point, Grace, I know one of the key pieces of legislation the coalition is advocating is for language equity and access. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, so during the pandemic, I think a lot of people really started to pay attention more to issues that Asian Americans were experiencing because of the rise in anti-Asian racism and violence. But one of the issues that kind of came to light more were all of the barriers that people faced in terms of accessing really needed benefits and services like unemployment services or, food stamps or any other state program. So our bill, the Language Equity and Access Act, would expand investment in language access at state agencies and really ensure that state agencies are prioritizing language access in all of the things that they do.
Vaughn, what are some of the ways you've seen language barriers impact your community?
Yeah, I think as Grace has noted, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we definitely saw the impact on our community. Even just basic information about, how do you wash your hands and how do we get testings done? Those were things that were all provided in English. And I think even as English speakers, we saw just how chaotic and confusing it could be. Imagine doing that in another language. And so community organizations really stepped up in this moment to be able to provide information to our community so that they get a better understanding of ways to protect themselves and their family.
As you both mentioned, this is the first time that Asian American Action Day is being held in person since the pandemic. Grace, how would you say the political movement or this moment is different for Asian Americans this time compared to maybe pre-pandemic?
Well, like I mentioned before, I think there is a lot more public awareness of some of the issues that Asian Americans face. But to be honest, there's still a lot of lack of understanding about the diversity of our community and the kind of range of experiences that people have accessing different state services, interacting with government, just the barriers that they face in their daily lives. So we really hope to uplift that more and take advantage of this kind of new moment where there's also incredible Asian American representation in our state legislature. There's now 9 Asian Americans in the Illinois General Assembly, which is just so far beyond the one that we started with, just 5 years ago.
Vaughn, as we mentioned, it's Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. We've got about 30 seconds left. What do you want people to take away from this month?
Yeah, I think as Grace mentioned, we're a diverse group of people. I think a lot of folks will ask, what are the issues impacting Asian Americans? And it's a lot of the issues impacting everyone else. It's, housing, it's being able to access healthcare. Southeast Asian Americans have one of the highest deportation rates, for example, that not a lot of people are aware of. And so immigration issues are also very important to our communities too.
Okay, yeah, that is something that I did not know and was not aware of. All right, Grace Pai and Van Nguyen, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
And we're back to wrap things up right after this. What does justice for Emmett Till look like for you?
Justice for, in our sense, is to serve humanity.
Black storytelling is a huge part of our culture, and so we wanted to make sure we gave young writers the opportunity to share their stories.
I think it's important that people feel empowered and find a light within themselves, whether it's art or not, but if it can be sparked with an idea, I think that's the type of things that change the world.
And that's our show for this Monday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
And you can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10.
Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great evening.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a proud sponsor of diversity, equity, and inclusion-focused free continuing legal education for lawyers throughout the region.